And it is a full house tonight. Woo! Welcome to the finale of our 2024 Seriously Entertaining. I am Amanda Foreman, and this is Daniel Gallant.
How are you? So, as many of you know, for 11 glorious years, House of SpeakEasy has been on a mission to transform how readers, audiences, and students experience literature.
Oh, yes. By the way, Dan, the reason why he's on stage is because he is the new executive director of SpeakEasy. Please welcome Dan Gallant. So, as you know, we are book evangelists. Yes, we are. We are community connectors. We celebrate literature's transformative power, and we believe in empowering students and readers and writers.
With every book that we distribute, every author we showcase, and every student we inspire, we are building a more literate, empathetic, and connected society.
We run several programs, including the Bookmobile, Speak Together, but tonight it's this program, Seriously Entertaining. And that is our mission: to connect readers and writers, to inspire, to have words and curious minds come together and have conversations that spark literary fireworks.
Our Speak Together writing workshops and our author visits in schools and libraries across New York City nurture young voices and show students that their stories matter.
And we have reached thousands of people, thousands of young people, and we have proven that every voice, indeed every voice, has the power to connect, to heal, and to inspire.
And our Bookmobile is a literary festival on wheels and a love letter to New York City.
Indeed. If that's my mother, tell her I will call her back. Just saying. But in the meantime, we have distributed over 25,000 books to communities across New York City. Yes, we are turning book deserts into lush literary landscapes.
And we're not just giving books away, we are opening doors, creating pathways, and showing that literature belongs to everyone.
So I think you may have guessed from our opening spiel that yes, we do believe there is a Santa Claus. No, we do believe in the power of storytelling to connect, indeed, connect authors and readers, strangers and friends, between who we are and who we might become. And tonight, oh yes, we invite you to listen, to imagine, and to connect. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you. Well, thank you all very much for being here, and it is my honor to introduce our first reader, our first author of the evening. McLeod Chapman is a master of horror storytelling and author of novels, short stories, monologues, and screenplays. Clay has written comics for Marvel and Dark Horse. His book, Wendell and Wild, was adapted for Netflix by Jordan Peele, and his new novel, Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, arrives in January. Of his new novel, critics have said it's dizzyingly imaginative, with suspenseful tales of paranoia that keep readers riveted until the last surprise is sprung. Without further ado, McLeod Chapman.
Woo!
Hello. Wow. Sound check. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. My name is Clay. And tonight I would like to pay respect to someone I never really knew. Not his name. I mean, anything about him, honestly, other than the fact that he worked for the U.S. Postal Service. Can I tell you the story of someone I didn't know? It's really strange being here tonight, having been tasked to share a story with you all. But when I was first invited, my mind just leapt right up the block to Astor Place, because a mailman was murdered there. Now, I'm not originally from New York. I grew up in Virginia. I could just barely remember my first trip to Manhattan. I couldn't have been any older than, say, like 6 or 7, but every memory that I'm going to offer you tonight is going to be a bit hazy, filtered through who I am now, so you're going to have to forgive me if I'm a little off about particular details, but if I'm being honest, I'd like to think that who I am has a little bit to do with this particular moment in my life, just me and this mailman. Now, this had to be somewhere around the early to mid-'80s. My mom is actually a potter, and she had been invited to do a craft fair up at Lincoln Center, and I was fortunate enough to come along. This was my very first trip to the Big Apple. I mean, as a boy, all I ever knew about New York is, from what I had seen in the movies or on TV. I had never ridden the subway, never walked along the corridor of skyscrapers, never seen the Empire State Building. But what I remember most out of anything is Astor Place. I remember the cube, giving it a spin. God, just like imagine walking through New York City for the first time as a kid. Everybody was so tall. Skyscrapers in of themselves, just towering over top of me. I remember that I had to kind of crick my neck back just to see their faces. I remember holding my mom's hand. I remember her guiding me through the tangle of people. Everybody walked so closely together. It was like passing through a cornfield of gray and black business suits. Everybody was like wearing business suits. And then I heard a shot. It's like a pop, really. There may have been more than one. I can't remember. But there was nothing really explosive about it. It was just this like pitiful little pop in a city full of so much sound. And then everybody ducked. And I just remember like this forceful wind blowing everybody down. Just like imagine a wind pushing through that cornfield, right? Flattening these stalks of people against the street again. There was a moment of commotion. And then people just started standing back up. There were some shouts, a few people ran, but for the most part, everybody just like got back up onto their feet again. Except for this one man. Couldn't have been like 5 or 10 steps ahead of me. It was a mailman. I remember the shale gray and blue uniform, the eagle emblem stitched across his chest. And he had been shot. I saw blood for the first time on someone that I did not know. Not on his body, but below. This faint blossom spreading across the concrete. There was a crowd gathering around him, and I remember all of these legs. Maybe it was just my height, but I remember seeing this mailman lying on his back, staring up at the sky, not blinking, through the tangle of all of these people's feet. He wasn't breathing. He wasn't moving. But what I remember more than anything else, anything in this moment, this story, is that my mother said to me, still holding my hand, and she said, "Say a prayer for that man." Maybe she said, "Say a prayer for that man's family." I'm not sure, but I remember hearing the pinch in her voice. Say a prayer for that man. Now, religion was never really something a part of our family. I can remember saying grace at dinner a couple times, or maybe, prayers whenever I spent the night at my grandparents' house, but I had never been tasked with having to say a prayer for someone I didn't know, a complete stranger, and I felt the weight of it, the burden of responsibility. How was I supposed to say a prayer for a man I didn't know? And that's all I remember. That is all that I have of this moment from my childhood, over 40 years ago now. I mean, I don't know who shot him or why. I can't even remember if I've ever asked my mother about it, but I have these kind of synapses and narrative that suggest that this man was mugged for his mailbag. But I don't know, other than it happened 10 feet in front of me. But I still have his prayer. I don't offer it every time I walk through Astor Place, but every so often when I'm walking through, I'll think about him, how close we were for this brief moment. I will think about his family, and I will say a prayer for him. Storytelling is the only prayer that I have. If I can share a simple story with you, share the life of a man who I never knew, who you'll never know, never meet, so that maybe the next time you walk through Astor Place, you might think of him, who he was. And you might say a prayer for him as well. Doesn't need to be a prayer. I mean, all I'm asking for is for you to think of him. And just tell someone's story. It's a strange favor, I know, forgive me. But, this is the one time, the only time I have ever been able to share this story and feel like it could matter. It's the only time that I've ever shared this story out loud with anybody. I want you to remember someone you never met. I want you to say a prayer for that man. I want you to say a prayer for that man's family. Thank you.
Gosh, that was bold. Thank you. Let's hear it one more time for Clay McLeod Chapman. Woo! Gosh, a cornucopia of microphones here. Maybe I'll use this one. So, coming onto our stage now is one of the most versatile people that I know. She can do it all. She can sing, she can act, she can do stand-up, she can write fiction, she can write non-fiction. Season 6, episode 17, Push, as it's called, from Grey's Anatomy. Oh, yes. Doctor, I hugged him. We were just doing bear hugs. I hugged him. That's what did this? Yes, that was Moon Unit Zappa hugging her son so hard that she inadvertently caused him to have a ruptured cyst on his liver. But fortunately he lived, so it's all fine. So Moon published her first book back in 2001. It's a semi-autobiographical novel. It's called America the Beautiful. And it tells the story of America Throne, who is she is the daughter of America's favorite avant-garde painter. And it's the story of how she struggles to find love, identity, and purpose, and a purpose that is uniquely her own. So we then had to wait 23 years for a follow-up to that novel, the sequel, and this time she skipped the fiction part and she went straight to what really happened to the girl with a really famous father. Because Earth to Moon, a memoir, it has been described by critics as this extraordinary survival story, and it is all of that, but it is so much more. Every woman here knows what it is like to fight, to be seen, and to be known for who she is. And as the daughter of Frank Zappa, Moon Unit had to fight harder than most of us to achieve that. And so what does writing mean to her? I think it means having her own voice and her own story to tell. And this is what she says. This is in her own writing. She says, "It's not being conditioned to put my needs aside and prioritize someone else in a position of power." Indeed, indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, Moon Unit Zappa.
I've always wanted to run on stage like I was a top life and business coach exec. Yeah. Boldly peddling cutting-edge solutions to problems only I can solve. And here's that message. What you think is how you feel. Yeah. And the shapes you make with your body affect how you think, which affects how you feel. Sometimes I jog like this. This is a true story. Like I'm a winner crossing a finish line. I will Gallipoli the shit out of my workout in your neighborhood, and I will wear wild clothing so that if someone drives by, they will see me and take note. In case I go missing from getting abducted, these key eyewitnesses will not forget that they saw that seemingly outgoing lady the last time she was seen alive. I realize I am not in the abduction demographic anymore, but I am emotionally and mentally stunted around the popular ages that kids get snatched, and I love to belong. Dark, I know. When I was first told about the show, I said yes because my publisher said, do as much press as you can do to promote your memoir. And as an introvert, defined by someone who loses energy by being around people, I did not want to say yes. I wanted to stay in my pajamas, meaning in the nude, because I don't own pajamas. Did that sound true? Because I said it boldly? Well, I do have pajamas. Back to the boldness. As I contemplated the topic a few months back and nothing was coming, I had an epiphany. I realized I am tired. The boldest thing I could actually do, the most current breakthrough change to correct the imbalance of a lifetime of my hyper responsibility and people pleasing, the nicest thing I could do for myself is cancel. So I called. And I canceled. And they said, we've already advertised you're coming. Fuck, fine. I'll still do it. Because I wasn't willing to live through the next tier of consequences. I chose your money and fun over my feelings. That is historical. I was willing to irresponsibly show up for you with nothing memorized to keep my word, even if it harmed me. But why? As I thought about it a bit more, I realized I didn't fight to the death for myself because I couldn't justify ditching because I wasn't born with a mega talent that needs and deserves stewarding, protecting. I don't sing like Barbra Streisand or Celine Dion. They seem like people who could legit get away with canceling at the very last minute because they have talents that are so enormous that they have to honor that tremendous gift. And as I thought about it some more, I thought, that's weird. I questioned my thinking. I thought, do you have to have one of those unbelievable abilities to have your own back? And boldly say, no, not doing it. Or quietly say, no, not doing it. And then I thought, what would it take for me to boldly set and keep a boundary and have my own back? Illness? Hospitalization? Death? Yeah, those could work. So what I did for the last few weeks, I was in many crowded places, subways, holiday parties, museums. On a Saturday when it was raining outside and I got very, very close to anyone with a horrible cough, I'm obviously joking. Fake getting sick is what weak and immature people do. And that is not us. We are not weak or immature. I once took a self-defense class and the teacher asked us to name all the things that we like and didn't like about our bodies. and ourselves. And then he said, now look at that list. What you don't like about yourself, you won't protect. Can you believe I have still not gotten to the story I'm going to tell you? Okay, here we go. Yeah. Here we go. This is the true story of how boldness is overrated, only causes trouble, and sometimes makes me wish I could rewind it and walk the boldness back. Like you, my role models were my parents. Like you, I had a rock and roll icon for a father who satirized popular culture, made 100 albums in 25 years, and was married to my mother who went batshit crazy from my dad's constant cheating. Like you, I called my parents by their first names, fresh out of the oven. On Frank and Gail's first date, Frank picked Gail up in his lemon yellow station wagon and dragged Gail along to a business meeting he was having. At some point in the date, Frank blew his nose into Gail's skirt, both territorially, hard to say, claiming her and signaling dominance to his potential business allies. This is the story that Gail told me about their meet cute, and this story always bothered me. How rude, how weird, how not fun for her. Or was Frank just some eccentric, savant mega talent who was just missing some basic social cues and was extremely efficient and resourceful, grabbing the nearest thing he had access to keep the flow of the conversation in play without having to awkwardly excuse himself? Gail saw it as romantic. You wouldn't blow your nose into someone's attire if you didn't like them. Side story. When Frank's driver's license expired, he never renewed it because he did not want to stand in line at the DMV ever again. And so Gail drove him everywhere from that expiration date on. Also romantic. I say all this because that date and many other examples I give in my memoir that you can purchase outside, these were my templates for love. Boldness. When I was in my early 20s and single, an actor friend of mine introduced me to another actor friend of hers. I was very flattered. She went to help matchmake. Then I met her selection and was underwhelmed. He had gaps in his teeth, thinning wisps of blonde hair. He was wearing a baggy Cosby-style oversized sweater, jeans that were too faded for the fashion of the times, and round-toed cowboy boots. He looked like a cross between Corey Haim and John Malkovich, and I had no idea that he was a popular actor on a very popular sitcom, or that he would go on to become an even bigger film star. To me, he was just this dorky, poorly dressed, I don't know, idiot with a southern drawl. But he did have a nice physique and a pleasing voice and dimples, and he was bold. He asked me out on the spot. The following week, he followed through. A rarity, and he picked me up in his white Corvette, blasting Cat Stevens, and the mild disgust returned. Instead of dinner and getting to know one another, he took me to see a foreign film at the Cineplex Odeon. That is an LA reference, very fun. Immediately I could tell the movie was terrible. A vicar was up in a tree with a married woman from the local village, and they were attached to this pulley and lever system, and every time he pulled this rope, the woman's dress would rise up and he'd insert himself into her. Ooh! I leaned over and I whispered, "Can we please leave?" And he looked at me like I was crazy, and he said, "I don't even know how I feel about this film." And he moved 2 seats over and continued watching it. Now, I was appalled, as were the couple behind me, but I stayed because this was before Uber and the actor was my ride home. So me and the 2 strangers behind me, we did a whispering, running commentary about how awful this movie was, and we laughed the whole time. And when the movie was over, my date also knew it was bad, but was too proud to admit it. The actor dropped me off at home and boldly asked me out for a second date. I was shocked. I was even more shocked when I said yes. On date 2, we went to a restaurant, and this time, I found him charming. We had things in common, like a love of exercise, a love of organic food. He was a reader, so hot. Things were looking up. Then he asked me about my nails. You like to keep them long or short? Short, I said. It's more European, plus I'm a writer and it's hard to hold pen and type with long nails. He took my hands in his, and I felt a little jolt. Were sparks flying? And he pulled my hand to his mouth. And then he inserted my fingers into it. And he dug something out of his teeth. Did he just use my nail as a dental instrument? This dude is a kook. Or was this actor some eccentric savant mega talent who was just missing some basic social cues and was extremely efficient and resourceful, grabbing the nearest thing he had access to keep the flow of the conversation in play without having to awkwardly excuse himself? I started to see what Gail meant about this sort of thing being romantic. This quirky artist clearly likes me, or he wouldn't use my hand like waxed floss. On date 3, oh yeah, there's more. On date 3, the put-out date. That's how we did it back then, to show men we were ladies. We waited till number 3. I went back to his place. Beige walls, lumpy sofa, books in boxes. It did not say successful actor. It said, I need a nurturing, patient lady in my life. He moved in close, and he said, I just noticed, you're only pretty when you smile. I heard him say pretty, so I tried to just keep smiling for the remainder of the date. And then I noticed something on his bookshelf that looked like a glass rake, and I was like, what's that? And he picked it up and he zapped me in the forehead with it. And it put like electrical shock through my face and body. And then he raked it across his own scalp to show me that he didn't hurt me, but to check to see if he did hurt me. And he did hurt me. Anyway, I realized it was a tool that he was using to stimulate hair growth, and I deduced that maybe he shocked me with it because I had touched an early balding nerve, and I realized I had to be more careful, more sensitive to his vulnerabilities, and then he lunged at me like a sexy tiger. My dress came off, then the doorbell rang, and I waited for him to return. Many minutes passed, then many more, and I thought, maybe the date's over and he just forgot to tell me? As I untangled my dress from the sheets, that's when I noticed a dried period blood stain. I scratched at it. It was recent, and it was not mine. I mean, gross, right? And seriously, don't even change the sheets for a different girl? I called Gail in a panic on a rotary phone. I don't know what to do. I found period blood on his sheets and I'm trapped in a back room. And she said, well, Moon, when you love someone, that's the kind of stuff you put up with. Right, so true. I pulled myself together, I recalibrated, and I got dressed, and I found him in his living room signing checks with his personal assistant. Hi, I'm Moon. Laura, she said. God knows how many times she'd seen this scenario. And I said, well, I'm going to get going. Okay, said the actor, not looking up. And off I went. On date 4, I know! The deed was definitely going to happen. I could feel it. He came to my place. I had music on, candles lit, a fire going in the fireplace, and I dazzled him with my culinary talents. And we finally made love. I think we must have, because I don't really have a clear recollection of it, so it was possibly unremarkable, but I know he did sleep over, so something happened, and he did have his script changes sent to my house, so I knew that he was sleeping over. Anyway, in the morning, I made him some coffee and some breakfast while he showered, and then I heard him call out, honey. I thought, ooh, I've graduated to honey. Honey, can you bring me 1 fresh raisin? 1 fresh raisin? Oh my God! I thought, this guy is as weird as my dad. I guess I have a type. So, for this out-of-the-box thinker, I headed to the dried fruit section of my fridge to find one fresh raisin, quadruple check to see that it was indeed organic. Good news, organic. But I only had sultanas and black currants are brownish like a raisin, but small. So I went for the blonde raisin, and I prayed that I chose wisely because I have a bit of a temper. And I boldly reach into the box, and I take out one golden, glistening, dehydrated grape, and I deliver it to the sexy man who's naked in my steaming hot shower. And I had to work quickly so no steam escaped. And I open the glass door, and I extend the singular organic prize to my soapy date like a tiny Academy Award. And he looks at me like I am batshit crazy. At the exact moment, I realize what he actually asked for was one fresh razor. Good night, New York!
Okay. Well, all right. I think that deserves another round of applause.
Yeah,
One
let's hear it
more.
from Moon Unit.
Okay, so now, of course, it is the time when all of you who are so literate and passionate about writing and words and books get to display that brilliance. On your tables, tip of my tongue. Can you all see it on your tables? No. Yeah, no. Oh, you can have
It's
mine
on the back
afterwards.
of the program.
Well, you can have this one. So, as those of you who have been here before know the score, and those of you who don't, I will tell you. This is our literary quiz. Dan will be introducing our quiz master, and he will be reading. He'll be reading 3 quotes, and you will identify who wrote it and the title. And you will not Google, because we can see you doing it. And then the winner at the end of the show will, win this tote bag full of signed books of the writers this evening. It is so valuable, so fantastic. It's better than Christmas. Here it is. I know. And so now over to Dan to introduce.
Yes, indeed. There can be only one winner, but do the best you can. The quotes range from easy to very difficult, but we have faith in all of you, and we have faith in our fantastic quizmaster, who it is my honor to introduce. Paul Latore, a.k.a. Paul Conquezo, is a poet, professor, performer, producer, publisher, curator, facilitator, activist, and advocate from the brick city of Newark, New Jersey. He hosts, performs, and facilitates workshops for the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, Lincoln Center, New Jersey Performing Arts Center, and Bloomfield College, where he serves as a professor. This year, Paul performed at 4 of our bookmobile visits to schools, parks, housing projects, and community centers, bringing verse to kids, and he helped us to distribute free books in book desert neighborhoods around the city. So it is my honor and privilege to introduce Paul Conquezo.
Kind of need that. Okay. How's it going, y'all? I'm a poet, so y'all can snap at any point you want. Yeah, let me get a snap. Okay. Yeah, we love it. I mean, it's speakeasy, right? Like, come on. Okay. Microphone adjusting. Okay. No. Okay. Yes. No. Okay. Yes. Okay. We're gonna pray. So I'm gonna read a poem real quick for y'all. Are y'all cool with that? I wrote a poem especially for tonight, so I really hope y'all are cool with that. Yeah? Okay. And then we're gonna get to these quotes, and I'm gonna test your literary muscles, right? So I was given the theme of tonight, and I wrote a poem, given that inspiration, called Bold-Faced. Great poet and now ancestor Nikki Giovanni once said, "We write because we believe the human spirit cannot be tamed and should not be trained." And in that same vein, I offer you boldness today. In the theoretical framework, we can never truly die nor age if we stay bold enough. And though it may seem tempting to lock down in our shells of post-COVID traumatic hermit disordered comfort, this invasive species called courage cannot dwell in a cell, though it swells in our cells when we manifest boldness. Because the ventricles of the human heart must be open and emboldened to grow, yet so many spend most of our lives frozen in cycles of fear, anxiety, and apprehension. In shrinking our voices as not to cause tension, but to take up space is to offend sometimes. Revolutions were not built off saying what's palatable nor polite. To speak boldly without apology is to be courageous. To add your pen to the pages of history seems to be one of the very few means we may ever reach eternity. This bold, courageous audacity can stretch the fabric of our collective human capacity. Our courage is our care. Our boldness, our bravery. Our audaciousness, our empathy. It lets us grieve and bleed within the safety of courageous spaces. Some might say they want to be lowercase, unremarkable, italicized or underlined at most, but I say talk your shit in all caps. Let your text be bold as the color your font is. Speak to the ancestors with fondness and reverence. Never let your scars become reference, but do learn from them. It is often our rock bottom that turns bedrock we build upon, and plenty lions will put their pride over fear. See, pride is there to remind you that despite how courageous you may be, we all still have some growth to go, and though we may slip back into fears like fear of abandonment, when my father left, when my marriage dissolved, when I lost a life I thought would be my first kid, and pride made me cry into the night sky just like doves in the wind. How can you just leave me standing alone in the world that's so cold? Maybe I'm just too demanding. Maybe I'm just like my father, too bold. But I've been told there's no such thing. Shakespeare once famously said, courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. Never bend your head, always hold it high. Look the world straight in the eye, and I've learned fortune favors the bold. So go ahead, be unusual, be quixotic, be neurotic if you must, but never shy away from your courage. It's what the ancestors would want for you not to shrink. To never for a second think anyone alive can tame your wildness. I mean, Nikki G did tell us we can't be trained, and this spirit must not be housebroken. So go ahead and be bold then. Speak in volumes, leave behind volumes for future prides to read, and courageously lead, because we speak in bold print into eternity, and there is simply no going back from that now. Thank y'all for letting me poet at you. Now I'm gonna throw these 3 quotes at you, and they're gonna fly up on this screen, and no one's gonna cheat, right? Honor code, Scouts honor, Hunger Games, all those things. I don't know how the Boy Scouts turned into Hunger Games, but they did somehow. I guess it was the Hunger Games for those boys sometimes. Sorry, out of pocket. It was bold. That was a bold joke. You gotta admit, that was pretty bold. All right, quote number 1. The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong in the broken places. But those that will not break, it kills. It kills the very good and the very gentle and the very brave impartially. If you are none of these, you can be sure it will kill you too, but there will be no special hurry. That's quote 1. Nice light dinner fare. Quote number 2. So if you know that one, jot it down, write it down, make a note in your phone. Quote number 2. I wanted you to see what real courage is. Instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand, it's when you know you're licked before you begin. But you begin anyway, and you see it through, no matter what. All right. And quote number 3. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. All right. So, Y'all are tasked with these 3. I am the quiz master. I'm tasking y'all with these tasks, and we'll see. Thank y'all. Enjoy the intermission. It's been an honor. I'm Paul Con Queso.
Please give it up for Paul Con Queso. And we're going to take a 10-minute intermission during which you are welcome to puzzle over those quotes, but don't look them up. And we'll see you again in 10 minutes. Good luck.
Thank you.
Well, hello, folks, and welcome back for the second round, the second half, the second act of Seriously Entertaining here at Joe's Pub. Thank you all for your energy and enthusiasm, and I hope that you found those quotes puzzling but not too puzzling. We'll find out soon whether anyone got all three of them. We're about to bring up our third speaker of the evening. Rumaan Alam is the best-selling author of Leave the World Behind, a National Book Award finalist that became a popular Netflix film, and the stunning new novel, Entitlement. Alam's writing has illuminated the pages of The New Yorker, New York Magazine, the New York Times Book Forum, the New Republic, and many other periodicals. Critics praise the bleakly satirical impact of Entitlement, and his work has been called, this book has been called a psychological thriller that subtly turns into a vicious expose. It sneaks up on you and wins you over.
And so this is Rumaan writing about writing, which shows why he is a writer's writer. He says, I think there is a prevailing snobbery about writing horror or thriller, quote-unquote, genre fiction, that somehow it is fundamentally less serious. I don't think that's true. Because in the end, it's really about building a very efficient machine in order to achieve a very specific goal. The author wants to make you quake. He wants to make you shiver. He wants to terrify you. Now, literary fiction is a genre all its own. It's got its own expectations, its own conventions, and the aim is less often to elicit that emotional response. It's more often about doing something compelling on the level of language or style. So you see, it's just a different kind of endeavor. And I don't think that means one is better than the other. Indeed.
Please welcome to the stage, Rumaan Alam.
Hi. I noticed before that people's Instagram handles are here, which is hilarious to me. Why is my Instagram handle up there? Anyway, you're all required to follow me on Instagram now. We were asked, oh, I'm wearing my hat. I did this event. Oh, how rude of me. I did this event not that long ago, and the woman I forget who it was, we were on stage, and she reached over and took my hat off and was like, don't wear your hat in public. Sorry, that's so rude of me. Anyway, I'm supposed to talk about boldness, but I'm also not supposed to talk with notes, so I'm really breaking the rules, but because I'm going to talk about shyness. I was a very shy child, and I don't really know what accounts for that. I'm a parent now myself, and now it's my feeling that your personality is just fixed from the start. Some people like the color yellow, some people like dogs, some people love cheese and hate cats. I like cheese and I hate cats. Some people are shy. Now I'm standing up here tonight telling you this story, so maybe it goes without saying that I'm not really that shy anymore. Because I learned how to be something else. I never entirely believe people who talk about their childhoods with any specificity. I don't remember really anything that happened to me when I was a kid. And in part, I think that's because I didn't do anything except for read. I had a book with me basically the entirety of my childhood. I would take a book to recess, and I would in fact pray that rain would mean that recess was canceled and I could go to the library. I was constantly dragged around to things with my parents because that's what it is to be a child. And we would go and like see an aunt or uncle. When you're an immigrant, you're always going to see some aunt or some uncle. And I would sit in the back seat of the car and read. And in a way, the only thing that I really remember from my childhood is the texture of the back seats in our gray Nissan Maxima. My favorite book was a book called Harriet the Spy, which I bet a lot of people in this room know. Yeah, I heard a lot of gasps. It's a classic. Harriet is this like horrible, obnoxious kid who, she comes home every day after school. Also, this is not legible to you when you're 8 and reading it, but she's rich. She lives on the Upper East Side in this huge house and has a maid and a cook, and she has cake every day after school. Anyway, she has an amazing life. But she comes home after school, and she has a snack, and she changes into her spy clothes, and she goes out to spy on her neighbors on the Upper East Side. She watches this handsome man who has too many cats, and she watches this old lady who has given up on life and taken to her bed, and she watches this grocery delivery boy who can't stop eating. And she writes about these people in her notebook. I was a lot like Harriet. I was obnoxious, and I imitated her notebook of private thoughts. And like Harriet, I was really interested in watching other people, and I much preferred that to doing anything myself. Harriet was bold in this way that I never felt like I could be, because she went out into the world, and she took notes about what she saw. Now, Harriet the Spy is not really a suitable favorite book for a boy. The nice woman at the public library was always trying to get me to read books about boys. But I was born in 1977, so the books about boys that you were forced to read in 1986 were about boys playing sports or doing stuff in the wilderness. This is the last thing I wanted to read about. And really, books about boys reminded me that I was kind of a failure at being a boy, because the last thing I wanted to do was play sports or go into the wilderness. One of the secrets I was trying to keep as a child was that it was mostly girls I read about, because girls had this liberty that I could only imagine. It's not that they were allowed to have romantic feelings about boys, but that was probably part of it. I can see now, from the vantage of adulthood, that the shyness of my youth had so much to do with the fact that I was just a sissy, that I was really baffled by the way other boys were not, and that I was terrified to do anything, to throw a ball, to talk too loud, to run, that might let people see who I actually was. So I thought if I did nothing, if I laid low, if I read my book, nobody would ever notice me. None of this really bothered me because I had Harriet for company. Harriet was the spy who changed my life, and she shows up in another book by Louise Fitzhugh. I wonder if people who got excited about Harriet the Spy will know this book. It's called The Long Secret. It's actually a better book than Harriet the Spy. It's not really a sequel to Harriet the Spy because it's a book about someone else. It's a book about this girl named Beth Ellen, who's a classmate of Harriet's in the city. They're rich, like I said, so they go to the Hamptons for the summer, and Harriet and Beth Ellen are neighbors. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The Long Secret is this book set in Watermill, New York. And there's like something strange happening in Watermill in the summer that this book takes place. Somebody is leaving these horrible, very cruel anonymous notes all around town. They're poison pen letters, basically. These weird aphorisms and biblical quotations that are really cruel and hurtful. Whoever is writing these notes knows exactly what to say to the person who's received them, and they're not holding back. There's a mean checkout girl at the grocery store, and she gets a note at the beginning of the book that just says, "Jesus hates you." So Beth Ellen, who's the protagonist of this book, she lives with her grandmother because her mother is this horrible socialite. She has the most perfect name of any fictional character in the world. Her name is Zini. Zini comes back to the Hamptons for the summer. She has a new husband in tow, and she hates her shy daughter. She complains about Beth Ellen's meek appearance, her limp demeanor, her interest in going to college. And Zini, of course, ultimately receives one of these poison pen letters, and it says, "In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children." It's the meanest thing you can say to a parent. This is a spoiler alert for a 40-year-old book, but the person who's sending these notes turns out to be Beth Ellen, this meek little kid. Beth Ellen is so meek that everyone at school, including her friend Harriet, calls her Mouse. And Beth Ellen refers to herself throughout the book as Mouse. But she doesn't seem to mind that because she has these notes, she has this outlet. And she's been watching everyone around her, her monstrous bitch of a mother, the mean girl at the local store, and she knows what to say to them. And at the end of The Long Secret, I just read this book not that long ago, and I was really, I remain really shocked by this sentiment. Beth Ellen is talking to her grandmother, and her grandmother says, "Oh, you're so shy. You're very shy, aren't you?" And then she says, "Shy people are angry people." I think that's such an astute observation for a book that is ultimately meant for children. Because I was shy, but really, I was angry. I was angry at myself that I couldn't be what I thought a boy was, which was, of course, much simpler than being angry at the abstraction of society itself, at whoever decided that there's only one acceptable way to be a child. But it didn't matter, it kept me shy. By college, this feeling dissipated, and that shyness dissipated, but I can still access that anger and that shyness if I think about it. I'm angry at myself for not letting myself be a child. And I'm angry at this received idea that there's one acceptable way to be a child. But the world is really different now than it was when I was a kid. And I think it's better in some ways. It's worse in much more obvious ways, unfortunately. But it's better in this one way, which is that I can say to you tonight, without it being a punchline, that it's these two made-up little girls who helped me become a man. Louise Fitzhugh's fictional heroines, I think, shaped the course of my life. Harriet and Beth Ellen both knew that writing things down is a way of exerting power. And that's what I do now for a living. And the page is the place where I feel most free. And for the most part in my life, I don't feel bold at all. But when I'm writing, I do. And I suspect that that is why fearful people are really insistent about banning books. Because they do have this power to make those of us who are just a mouse into a man, or as the case may be, into the most bold thing I can think of, which turns out to be a little girl. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, one more time. That was brilliant. Woo! The final speaker of the night is Charles King. Now, Charles, I know, yes, well, the thing about Charles King is that he is known in many different arenas. Some of us know him as a historian of ancient history. He wrote an amazing book about the history of the Black Sea. We were just back there talking about Heraclea Pontica in the 4th century BC. But he's also written about the gods of the air. He writes about contemporary Russian politics. He has now written the best biography I've ever read about Handel. So this is when you know that you are, or one is in the presence of a true master, the master who can literally master any genre. And now that he's turned his hand to 18th century biography, as one does. I did that once, actually. It's not as easy as it looks. This book, Every Valley, it's received absolute raves, as it should do, including one from me. There's a blurb on the front. I'm just saying. But Charles says something really interesting, something that I had never thought of about the act of writing a biography. And I actually took a screenshot of it, and I'm going to read it to you because he gets to the heart of the matter. This is what he says. When he is researching and writing, I always think that if it was a detective story, the detective at some point would say, wait a minute. Nobody's telling exactly the same story about what happened. Well, I would be suspicious that everybody is lying. And yet, most of us, when we are writing stories or telling stories, we never get to be suspicious like a detective. Indeed, that is the difference. He was suspicious, and therefore he got to the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, Charles King.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thanks very much. So, the thing about writing a book about Handel's Messiah, especially this time of the year, is that you come to expect that your walk-up music is going to be the Hallelujah chorus, and I did not expect how deflating it would be when that doesn't happen. So I'll carry on. So I wrote a book called Every Valley, which makes a terrific holiday present, if I may say so. And it's about the backstory to Handel's Messiah. This piece of music that, especially this time of year, is absolutely everywhere. Carnegie Hall is doing its 150th consecutive annual concert of this piece of music, if you can believe it. It was first performed in 1742, and it's the only piece of music in the classical repertoire that has never been revived. Never. It's been in continuous performance. Since then, Bach was revived. He went out of fashion, and then he was revived at some point. But Handel's Messiah has always kind of been with us. It's become kind of the sonic pumpkin spice latte of the season, you know? I mean, the Hallelujah chorus, for unto us a child is born, you know, it's the shepherds. And it's the whole kind of story that is just kind of there in the background. And I didn't realize, though, how I needed to hear this music in kind of a new way. My wife Maggie and I live in Washington, D.C. We live on Capitol Hill. And over the last several years, as for many of you, these have been some of the toughest years of our lives, as they've kind of been for everybody. There was COVID, and we had friends who had health issues and family issues. We had a serious health issue in our family. And then in the middle of that, there was January 6th, which was 6 blocks from our house. So in the middle of that history, I decided that we were kind of in need of something different. And Some time ago, I had purchased for Maggie for Valentine's Day an old Victrola. So it's one of those wind-up kinds, and ours is called a VV50 from 1925, and it's a portable, which means that it weighs about 40 pounds. And it's cast iron in this tiger oak case, and you wind the thing up, and let it go. And of course, then you're experiencing completely acoustic sound reproduction. There's not a piece of electronics in it. And I thought, if I could find the oldest recording of Handel's Messiah, which we both have loved over the years, the oldest recording I could find and put it on this Victrola, that would somehow be big and bold magic. And so I did what you would do, which is to go to eBay, and I found the oldest recording, 1927, Sir Thomas Beecham conducting the BBC Chorus and Orchestra in Westminster Hall, 1927. I purchased it from the seller in London, and it arrived in this whole box full of onyx shards. These things are made of shellac, they're not made of vinyl from that period. And he had just thrown everything in. It was clearly his maiden aunt's estate sale, where he had gotten all of this stuff, put it in a box, and then shipped it off to us. But miraculously, Messiah was intact. It was in its own buckram case, which is what it would have come in, completely intact. And I put this thing on, and for those of you who know this piece of music well, it begins with this lilting kind of overture in a minor key, and then shifts to a major key. So you have this sense of expectation and something building. And then this tenor voice comes in over the violins. In fact, the violins sort of stop, and a tenor voice sings out. And at that point, Maggie and I both burst into tears. We just burst into tears. And I thought, something special is going on here with this piece of music. It seems suddenly new and fresh and unfamiliar. So I started this journey to try to tell the story of where that emotion came from. Go to a performance this season. Please try to go to a performance anywhere you can, whether it's Lincoln Center or Carnegie Hall or Trinity Church, Wall Street here in New York, or your local choir. Go to a sing-along where people sing from their seats, and look around, and there will be somebody with tears in their eyes. There will be somebody weeping at this music for whatever private reason this piece of music speaks to them. And so Maggie and I both started this journey. I was researching the book, and we were traveling up and down the length of the United Kingdom to Venice, which has a connection to the story, to the eastern shore of Maryland, which turns out to have a connection to the story, strangely enough. In all of these places, looking at archives and letters and sites that had some connection to the creation of this piece of music by George Friedrich Handel. The person I was led to most spectacularly, the real center of the story in some ways, was a completely obscure figure named Charles Jennens. There's no reason you should ever have heard of him, but he's essential to the creation of this thing that is now one of the great treasures of world civilization. Because even though the music is written by George Friedrich Handel, one of the greatest composers of the period we now call the Baroque, Charles Jennens was the person whose idea it was, who assembled the text for it, unbeknownst to Handel, and then shipped it off to Handel, his friend, or even better, his frenemy. They did not get along very well, to set to music. Charles Jennens turns out to be kind of the Ira to George Gershwin, if you like, or the Bernie Taupin to Elton John. And those comparisons are not weird. They actually really fit this pair, the librettist, as we would call Charles Jennens, and the composer, which we would call Handel. Jennens was from one of the wealthiest families in Britain. He was born in 1700. He owned a massive estate in the English Midlands. His family had made its fortune in the iron trade right at the beginning of what we would call the Industrial Revolution. But he also suffered from a very particular illness that in the 18th century was called the hip, H-Y-P. The hip was short for hypochondria, but hypochondria did not mean a kind of imaginary illness or oversensitivity, although he wrote a lot in his letters about intestinal gas, I will tell you. But hypochondria in the 18th century meant what we would now call chronic depression, or maybe even bipolar disorder. And if you read his letters, and more than 100 have survived, you can tell when he's in a kind of manic phase and when he's in a super dark, low phase. He was a pretty good musician himself, although not a professional. He could read music and play things competently on the harpsichord or the piano, but much of his life was spent battling this sense of encasing doom and despair. His brother Robert had died by suicide, and so this may have been a family trait that he himself was spending much of his life trying to deal with, including by dousing it with a fair amount of what one of his friends called your old friend Burgundy. So at some point, when Jennens was around 40, so around 1740 or so, Charles Jennens repaired to his library and art collection, which turned out to be one of the greatest art collections in the country. He collected music manuscripts. He was Handel's greatest fan, his kind of super fan, and collected all of Handel's manuscripts. The oldest copy of Vivaldi's Four Seasons that we have was in Jennens's library. He repaired to this kind of sanctuary that he had built in Gopsall Hall in Leicestershire, his estate, and started pulling down from the shelves the King James Version of the Bible. He was a devout, high Anglican Christian. Books on theology, books on philosophy, laid them out on his library table and used long wooden sticks, we know, to kind of keep the pages open. And in this manic moment, started copying down Bible verses from the Hebrew prophets, from the Psalms, from the epistles in the New Testament, copying them down on sheets of paper. And you can imagine him then moving them around on this massive library table until they kind of made sense to him. Because for those of you who know the Messiah, it's of course completely composed of sacred texts. But nothing is in the biblical order. It's in the order that Jennens wanted you to hear. The things that made sense to him. How would he make his own theological, philosophical journey through his own faith, or to us in a more secular age, a journey toward the possibility of hope? How could you build your own ladder out of the abyss that Jennens found himself in? That was his contribution. He shipped those pages off to Handel. Handel, in 24 days, turned them into music and premiered that on the 13th of April, 1742, in Dublin. And that's the thing that we now know as Handel's Messiah, but we should really call Jennens's and Handel's Messiah. Because there's a secret that Jennens tells you right at the beginning. Because the first words that he wrote down, placed at the top of the Messiah, are the words, "Comfort ye. Comfort ye my people. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished. Her iniquity is pardoned." That's the first recitative that we've heard in every concert, every performance of this piece of music since 1742. The other secret is that that particular text from the book of Isaiah is not saying, "You people be comforted." It's a command from the prophet Isaiah. You do the comforting. You be the one to comfort my people. And I think what a tribute to this depressed, ill individual who, along with Handel, created one of the greatest works of music ever created, perhaps the greatest piece of participatory art ever created. That the biggest, boldest, bravest thing he ever did in his life was to comfort you and me. Thank you.
Gosh, that was
amazing.
It really was.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Fantastic evening. So now it is time for us to reveal the authors and the sources of those 3 quotes that you wrangled with earlier this evening.
Yeah, and we want to say we're really proud of all of you. Every single one of you. Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Because we know that you did not cheat. Yes. So, A for effort. All right, the answers. Number 1.
So
Wait.
collectively...
The answers. Okay, right.
Okay.
Because they do want to know.
Absolutely.
All right. Hemingway, Farewell to Arms.
Mm-hmm. The second one, that was The World Breaks Everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places. And many of you did get the author.
Yeah.
But yes, the book is Farewell to Arms. The second one, which begins, I wanted you to see what real courage is. The character, and we didn't ask you to guess the character, but the character is Atticus Finch.
Yes, come on, you know.
Yes, indeed. Well done. And the book is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee.
Yeah. Or Tequila Mockingbird in our house. Anyway,
Yes, indeed. And the third one, we didn't expect you to get the title of the source necessarily. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds. It was, of course, Sir Winston Churchill.
Dan's uncle. Right. So we picked the 3 most, nearly right. Congratulations. And Dan is going to choose the winner of the 3 nearly right. Oh, okay. There we go. Oh, there you go.
And the winner is Abby Crutchfield.
Well done, Abby. Woo, woo, woo!
Excellent work. And Abby will win a copy of each book by each of tonight's authors.
Oh, yeah, signed book. Yeah, I know, it's a miracle. Outside the door, by the books, where we're selling them, is where you can collect it. Right.
So, tonight we have traveled through worlds both familiar and strange and listened to voices that challenge, surprise, and illuminate.
Oh, yes, stories like the one you've heard tonight. They are bridges between hearts and windows into experiences that we might never otherwise understand.
As we stand here at Joe's Pub, surrounded by the electric energy of storytelling, we're reminded that literature enables connections, breaks down barriers, and empowers empathy.
I think we can all agree that books, what do? They help us to see the world. They help us to see the world through someone else's eyes and realize that our differences, yes, they are both profound, but they're also beautifully insignificant.
So books await you in the lobby, each one a passport to another perspective. Our incredible authors, all 4 of them, will be there to sign, to chat, and to continue the conversation that we have started here on stage tonight.
So, to our hardworking Board of Trustees, our tireless staff, our brilliant writers, 4 that you heard tonight, and most importantly, though, to you, our loyal and adventurous and enthusiastic audience. Thank you. Thank you for coming this evening. You know, in a world that can often feel divided, we are building empathy and we are inspiring creative innovation, one story at a time.
And we hope you'll join us back here at Joe's Pub on January 14th for our first seriously entertaining of the new year. The theme will be This Time Tomorrow. So now we hope you will read, listen, connect, and join us in the lobby as we celebrate our authors.
Happy holidays!
Happy holidays!